Today's guest is a reality TV fan favorite from some of my favorite personal shows like Big Brother, The Challenge, and The Amazing Race. But beyond the strategy and competition, we're going to get to know the person behind the shows. We're also going to dive into what it's like to be diagnosed with autism as an adult and how that can shape your whole world. That and so much more on today's episode. I'm so excited to have you here today. Welcome to Dare to Overshare, Kyland Young.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming, spending your day with me. For those of you that have been following me for a while, Kyland has been on my old podcast when it was called Your Best Friend Jackie. And since we've done a rebrand here, I wanted to bring him back for another deep dive into his life and a little catch up. So I really appreciate it and I'm so excited.
No, me too. And yeah, this is so cool. Like the setup, everything about this is just such a beautiful space, and it's exciting to see what you're growing it into.
Thank you.
I'm honored to be back and to be a part of it.
Thank you. It means a lot to me. So let's start off the way I start off every episode, which is with a vibe check. So mentally, physically, spiritually, all the things. How are you truly feeling if you look inward right now?
Gosh, what a tough question. First off, as we were just saying a minute ago, Mercury is in retrograde, apparently. So maybe that's some of it. But no, I'd say in general, I don't know what time people are watching this, but right now it's July, and this year has been one of the most difficult years I've faced in a while, I would say, to be honest. I had, neighbors and friends that got deported at the beginning of the year, and some people disappeared and they still don't know where they are. And so that was pretty, all-consuming of my mind emotionally, and supporting people and content and organizations around that. And then that rolled into, I was like, you know what? I can't let this consume my life. I have goals I wanted to focus on this year. And then February, I ended up having 2 personal losses. So I had back-to-back funerals in February, beginning of March. And I was like, going through that grieving process. And then 2 weeks into March, I had an injury while I was training. I had 2 of my discs, one bulging and herniated disc, like 2 of my discs basically rupture. And that put me down so hard. Like that's actually been such a long, overwhelming piece of my life. So as I've been still in recovery for that, but so much better now because I'm walking. I was, in the hospital and then on a walker for over a month and a cane, and then just realizing how much of my life revolved around movement, and how deeply that impacted me on various levels. I think I have been working on getting better at, not just saying, oh, no, I'm fine, like everything's good, and not even just in a passive way, but I realized that I'm someone who values gratitude so much, and part of me felt ungrateful for all the things I do have if I was to acknowledge anything that wasn't going great. So I think it was literally, it felt bad to acknowledge any of my pain when I'm like, well, at least I'm alive, and somebody else isn't, or, at least I can walk and I am recovering. And, I know somebody lost their leg a couple of years ago. And so it's just like, well, at least I didn't lose that. So it's been an exercise for me to be able to hold hardship and acknowledge it without being like, hey, that's okay to not feel, 100% good about everything, and to not, go down a path of toxic positivity about everything. And that doesn't mean you're being ungrateful. And so it's still something I think I'm working on, but I'd say this is one of the most, thorough answers to that now.
I love that. That's exactly what I want here, this space to just be okay with feeling however you feel. And I can relate so hard on not wanting to always focus on problems because of the exact same reason. Like, oh no, if I'm grateful and I know I'm abundant and I know I'm healthy and I know I'm all these things, I'll get more of it. But if I focus on the bad, I'm only attracting more of it. Sometimes we just have to pause and say, it's okay to feel all the feelings and still be grateful at the same time. And that's really hard to do, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I realized that the other part of it too was allowing space for acknowledging the limits in reality. Because I'm someone that, I used to I have lots of bracelets and stuff from various things, but one of them is from My Intent, and I have this word that says connections. My other word that I had for years and I just broke And now I'm like needing to replace it. I realize now more than ever. It broke like probably a year or two ago, but it said unrealistic. And I used to like love that concept of, being unrealistic. It was an old Will Smith interview I saw like in high school where he said, it's unrealistic to walk into a room and flip a switch and have lights turn on. But or it's unrealistic to think I'm going to bend this metal and fly people over the earth and oceans in this metal. But by thinking that way, you can achieve these things. And I think that I have lived a lot of my life with a similar ethos of not worried about whether something's unrealistic. And the challenge that I realized recently with the injury specifically is I had text messages from that day when I got hurt, because at first it didn't turn straight into pain. It turned into inability to move. I couldn't stand up. I was hunched over and I was like, okay, this is weird. And 6 hours later or so, I was, in the hospital, but in the worst pain of my life. But before that, I had a text message because I had this celebrity flag football fundraiser charity event thing that I was doing that weekend. And I was like, well, just in case, I'll probably be fine, but just in case, let me text the organizer yo, I'm going to find a replacement. I'll probably be fine, but just in case I have somebody as a backup. And then I look back at that message, now almost 4 months later when I still can't actually run. And I'm like, whoa, the fact that I thought I would be recovered and hit with that reality of hey, there are some things that no matter how powerful your mind are that you can't actually change. It doesn't mean that you can't have any impact, but there are some limits in reality at times. And that's been my other struggle, I'd say, outside the gratitude thing I mentioned earlier, is being able to acknowledge those limitations, understand them without losing all of my faith in magic and manifesting and the power of the mind and all of that. And so that I didn't even realize I lost the faith in that until probably a month ago, when I really was wait, yeah, that's part of why I feel so down and depressed, because I was thinking that this is gone and worthless, and that was so much of my life. And now I'm okay, yes, I can understand this limit without completely losing faith in all of these other positive things that help me push past perceived limits. So that's another aspect of it. It's been interesting.
That's so well said, because it is the yin and the yang of, it's so nice to be Delulu. I live in a Delulu reality.
Great.
100% ask anybody. I am Delulu. That's why I do most of the things that I do. And then having to ground yourself and be well, we're still on this earth. I still need to find a way to make money. I still need to feed myself. I still might get sick or have an injury or whatever. And yet life is so magical. It's these two things are true at the same time. And sometimes that's hard to grasp, because like you said, you're well, if everything's so magical, why can't I snap my fingers and heal myself, right?
Yeah.
We should be able to be these magical beings to just heal ourselves if we believe, right? But at the same time, sometimes it's not that simple. And it also may be a reminder from the universe to slow down, right? So maybe your injury is more of a message of take some time to rest and recover. Or what messages do you get from the injury? What good can you think of that's coming from the injury that you're dealing with right now? Let's go back to toxic positivity.
Yes.
Not toxic, though.
No, I feel that's been its own process, is trying to find the proper lessons from this experience, because I am someone who I usually try and correct, and I don't know if we talked about it last time or if I've said it somewhere else, but I used to say I believe everything happens for a reason. And a few years back, I had this shift because of, I encounter so many different people in so many different situations, and I shifted it to say I am fortunate enough to believe that everything happens for a reason, because I do believe that, but I also know that my circumstance, my experience are so different from other people, and my own, biology, neurology, all the things might be in a place. And I'm just I think about people I've encountered that have had just such insane hardships. And sometimes people will say, oh, this loss happened, they'll look at some atrocity in the world. It's oh, this loss happened because, of the lessons that society learned. It's yeah, but tell that to the person who actually experienced it. And sometimes they can feel that, but since you're not experiencing it and you're not them, I'm very much like, I just like to, it just feels a more respectful way to say it. So that's just a random, more oversharing caveat there. But the actual, and tangent, sorry, but the lessons that I do seek, since I do find myself in that fortunate position to believe that things are happening for a reason, make an effort to find what the reasons are. And for the injury, I found myself getting so bothered with everyone telling me about like, oh, it's so you could slow down and so you could be like, it was just so constant. And I feel that I do think that there probably is some aspect of slowing down, but I'd say more than that, what I've taken away is a mindset shift in terms of prioritization. As some of my friends, more of my friends are having kids and my siblings have kids, two of my sisters just had their second children last year. And so now I have 2 nieces and 2 nephews, and it's awesome and beautiful. But being with them and my other friends, I've realized that there's just such a limit of time and attention and focus and energy. And so I've gotten a lot better at this injury. When everything was taken away in terms of my ability, I couldn't even, I love watching movies. I couldn't even sit and focus on a movie because I was in so much pain and not able to do a lot of things. And so what I realized, like, okay, with this limited energy that I have now at such a fractional capacity of what I normally do, what is it that I actually want to do? And that exercise has stuck with me. So now I've noticed that, I had a friend that has supported me with a lot of different events that he does or that I do. And I was like, I do want to show up because this person is valuable. But now, so I am going to show up because it is a priority to me to show up. But I used to show up, at this time and stay and hang out and all the things. And I was like, no, I'm going to be in, I'm going to show my support, and then I'm going to be out at this time. And then just all the things that I, either cut to a more, specific amount of time or just cut out completely. And because I'm focused on, I just have more, I don't know if my capacity of focus increased or more so, I would say my ability to prioritize and decide where I'm going to apply the focus that I have has shifted. And so that feels valuable to me as something that I've taken away. And I feel good now. I don't feel guilty about, saying no or not showing up to things or whatever it happens to be. And I also have noticed a different sort of gratitude is the other lesson I'd say. And that is in terms of, I'm very fortunate that with this injury, I am expected a full recovery, and I feel myself so close to there. Like, still, once again, going back to the limitations, it might be a couple more months. I hope it's, closer to 1 to 2 months than to 4 to 6 months. But the point is, I will be getting better, and the progress I've already felt and had is such a strong indicator that allows me to believe that, and not just in my own positive thinking mindset, but in something grounded in what I'm experiencing. But now I've experienced this limitation of movement. And so I think about, there's going to be a time, hopefully, 30, 40 plus years from now, where this is my forever, where like I have this limited amount of movement, this limited capacity of energy and ability. And now all of the time that I have where that's not the case, I am so appreciative of it. And it's not even just, the running and the exercise. It's, being able to lay down on my back flat and rest and feel like rested is something that I still can't actually do. And so I'm getting better. So I'm getting a lot closer to where I can, but now I'm thinking about, I was always grateful to walk, but I wasn't always grateful for being able to lay down and relax. I wasn't always grateful for enjoying a long shower and standing up and rather than just trying to rush through it or being sitting down, trying to clean myself. Like, that is these new aspects of things that I'm grateful for now, but then I also have that perspective of when this is my forever, I will not look back and think, wow, I didn't appreciate it at the time.
Yeah. What a beautiful thing to take away from something that feels so tragic in the moment, and a skill to have to be able to find the good or find the appreciation in it. So wish you a speedy recovery. I know you're going to recover. And speaking of recovery, people that know you from TV, they know you as a competitor. They
Yes.
know you as running and jumping and flying off things and all sorts of things, right? From Big Brother to The Challenge to Amazing Race. So when people know you in that lens as a competitor, what are you actually like when the cameras are off? You're just you at home by yourself. Do you see yourself in that same light, or do you see yourself in a very different light?
Oh, I'm a competitor. I'm competitive. One of my go-to answers when I would, do the interviews for the show or even just, talking in conversation, people are like, how competitive are you? I'm like, more than you. Like that's usually how I feel. And it's funny because we look back now at, with I have 4 sisters, and so 3 of them are younger than me. And we look back at me playing, Monopoly or some sort of any board games with them, and if you land there, then you're now bankrupt because you can't afford to pay me. And it doesn't matter that you're 5 years old. You decided to roll the dice. You joined this game. That's the game that we're playing. And I would get, a little bit of scolding from my parents, but they also knew that was me. And like, it wasn't a malicious thing. It just was, I was like, this is what we're doing. We're in the arena. We're going to play. And so that is me in general. And I feel that, and I love competing, and I also don't mind. I don't prefer to lose, but I don't mind losing. Losing is devastating to me because of how competitive I am, but I'd rather compete and lose than not compete. And so I think that is just core to who I am. And it is something I'd say as I've grown in my maturity to be able to hide some of it when it's appropriate. Like I just was at VidCon and we did this creators game, and they had us on this court playing a little fun competition. It's all supposed to be for fun. And the way that I was seething when my team was losing at something, and I was like, wait, there's just kids watching us and people are here for fun. No one really cares. And I'm like, I care. But I've gotten a lot better at being able to hold it in check, but it is... it's part of me, and I don't mind it because it's not all consuming. It just is part of me, and it helps push me to be better. And that's also the big part of, I think a lot of people confuse, I've been known on some of the shows to talk about how much I want to compete against the best. Mm-hmm. And that people mistake that of like an ego thing as far as like, I want to beat the best. And for me, I've always just said, no, how can I find out how good I can be if I don't raise the level? Like if I don't face a harder opponent, I go back to I'm a big fan of Dragon Ball Z back in the day, and there's a character, Vegeta and Goku, and Vegeta's the cool one, but Goku is kind of the nice, chipper, positive one, but he still wants to compete, and he'll be sitting across from his opponent like, oh yeah, like, oh, you need to charge up and get better? Do that, and then we'll start. I'll wait for you because I want to see how good I can be, and I can't do that if you're not at your best. And so that's just a mindset I've understood and love, and it's hurt me at times, and probably as a factor, it cost me $750,000 at a time, but it also has helped push me, and I'm one that looks to the future and sees like, okay, the future of my life still feels really good. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm delusional about it, but it still feels really good. So I'm like, whatever hardships I face in between now and then has to happen for me to be there.
Yeah. So you're very vocal too about your neurodivergence, right? And so when you were on Big Brother competing, back then you didn't know, right?
No.
Like you did not have this diagnosis. So this is super fascinating to me. And I'm sure a lot of people listening, because now we're talking about it more as a society. How did you get through a show like Big Brother, which is so complex, so much strategy, so much socializing, so much of everything, right? In this crazy container. I mean, a regular person who's never been on Big Brother could never even understand like what craziness happens in there. And you did not have this diagnosis. So now that you know you have it, take me through what that experience was like for you. And did you always know you kind of felt different?
Yeah, I would say that first off, the last question, yes, I feel I always knew I felt different. I think one description that I've used is that, I always knew I was particular about a lot of things. But it turns out like when you do particular things and they're visible to other people, it makes you peculiar. And I think that was a realization I have from the fishbowl that is Big Brother, because it is, being observed for 3 months, 24/7 live feed cameras or just watching us live and interact. And I feel that, when I go back, because I did get a ADHD diagnosis, but that wasn't even until college. And so when I was growing up, I was just fortunate that I had such supportive, loving parents. And so my mom, I didn't talk until I started doing speech classes in kindergarten. But they just didn't think anything of it because we were all supportive. My sister was talking for me. My older sister would communicate what I needed, and I was pretty, self-sufficient, I guess, as a kid, or quiet. They were just like, oh, he's just a quiet kid. But my mom would go to all of my classes in elementary school, and she would talk to the teachers and say like, hey, he really likes learning, just so you know, but here's some things that are, specific about him and ways that he interacts and trouble that he may have getting stuck on something. And, we just didn't have the language or the knowledge. And maybe it's also like minority households in general haven't had the best track record of understanding, different mental health aspects. And I'm sure there's many layers to that. But that was something. And, the school system I was in, just one of the many underfunded school systems that doesn't have the resources to look out for those things. And so, and because I could do, well enough, and because I was learning and retaining information well, I just went under the radar because I kept getting by. And I think a lot of that had to do with, the double-edged sword of a lot of neurodiversity is that there are benefits. And so how I was learning and how I was retaining information allowed me to continue to excel in school, despite the social challenges I was facing that did just continue in different aspects of my life. But I loved learning about people too, because I saw a value to it. So, in college, I was always watching TED Talks and listening to different books to understand about people, because I was like, oh, this is something I'm not good at and I want to get better. So let me learn, just like any other skill set. And which, for the record, I think a lot of people say communication, but they don't understand the discrepancy between someone who is specifically around the autism spectrum. A lot of the social dynamic and social cues thing come from osmosis, which is effectively you learn by just being around it. You observe it naturally as opposed to intentionally. And that's most people. And neurotypical people would observe it and they just learn these things and they pick them up very subconsciously. Whereas many people on the spectrum it's very intentional, if at all. And so I had that basis, but then when you come to a house like Big Brother, any of these games, you suddenly realize how much this is you can only hold this mask for so long. And I think about, once again, in Big Brother, because I didn't have the diagnosis, I was much less aware of it. So I would find out later that people had interactions I thought was perfectly fine that was not taken that way or felt that way. Or I think about Azza and the cookout apparently just didn't like me. And when we're all family now, I love her. But I just remember people would be like, yeah, Ozzy hates you. And I'm like, oh, she's doing so good at like hiding our alliance. Like and we would talk and she would say how she doesn't. And I'm like, no, like I get you. That's fine because it's part of the game. And I think about also me. So there's challenges, but because so much of the game is strategy, that ultimately decides a lot more of how you can move forward in the season. If you can outmaneuver, then you can still get far in the game, which I was able to do, even though a lot of my, final speech in my head was about the fact that I'm pretty sure I'm not as likable as the other people here, but I'm here. And I think that should say something, except I didn't get there. So, but I think about the masking, and actually I think a more concrete example I realized was in the challenge. I remember one of the other competitors told me later on after the season, he's like, I didn't know how to read you because like I can feel certain interactions are inauthentic. And for me, I'm like, because they are. Because this isn't normal for me to behave in the way that is going to be considered quote unquote normal. Mm-hmm. But I know that in order for me to build relationships and to move forward in the game, that this is something I have to do. And in your daily life, that's actually fine. The mask works because people aren't analyzing you to decide, how are you trying to get me? Mm-hmm. Because in our daily life, we're not really competing. Mm-hmm. But in these shows, in the challenge, you actually are competing. So you are trying to figure out, what is it that I have to watch out for about this person? And so people, I realized in that environment, were a lot better at perceiving like, oh, something's off. Like I don't trust it. And it was a weird balance because I'm like, no. The things I'm saying and the things I want you to feel are real. Like I really do care about you. I really do, care about whatever I'm saying. This is not something I'm doing strategically as far as trying to make you believe something that I don't actually believe. I just don't actually feel it maybe. And but I care enough to want to feel it. And so that's like a weird, it's I relate, there's one last scene and this is there's a movie and graphic novel called The Watchmen. And one of the characters is Dr. Manhattan, and he has basically ascended to this place where he almost has removed a lot of his humanity or has it removed. And he had a girlfriend that he had a love interest, and she's confiding in another friend's like, I don't know if he cares about me still or if he's just pretending. And he's like, well, if he's pretending, then he cares. And I think that was something I relate to. I was like, yeah, like maybe sometimes I'm pretending, but like it's because I actually do care. I just don't know how to. Yeah. So it's a very weird thing to balance. And I know those several tangents and far away, but feel free to rein me back in if there's a specific part I missed of what you wanted to know.
No. That's all so interesting for, I'm sure, everyone to hear, because what you're saying is like your brain is trying to understand what you're quote unquote supposed to be doing or supposed to be saying. But even though you don't feel it, you care enough about the conversation, about the person on the other side of the conversation, that you want to try to get there. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's how I'm understanding it. And you talked about masking, right?
Yeah.
And I want to dive deeper into that, because that's a big term in the neurodivergent world, right? Kind of putting on a mask and trying to be acceptable or normal, quote unquote. So I want to go a little bit into masking, explain what that really is and how it affects you. You did kind of explain how it affects you in the show, but how it affects you in just your daily life with people just on a day-to-day.
Yeah, so masking is both a term, masking is both a psychological term, and it's also, as many words, has a more universal application. And you can just think about putting on a mask for exhibiting a behavior or moods that aren't really how you feel, mm-hmm. which is, the same thing that a physical mask would do. Mm-hmm. But when you get to the psychological aspect, it just is more in depth, and it's a more extreme version. So, which reminds me, something I think about when people talk about neurodiversity of any types. And, we go to ADHD and people talk about being distracted. And it's like, well, everyone gets distracted sometimes. It's like, yeah, that is true. Also, everyone pees. But if you pee 19 times a day or 190 times a day, then it's a problem. And that's actually, I forget which, documentation it's in, but for psychologists and when they are talking about different mental health things, the aspect of a condition or activity that decides it's a disorder is, does it have a significant negative impact to your life? And so likewise, like with the pee example, it's like, yeah, everyone does pee, but there's a certain threshold where it has a significant negative impact of your life. And likewise with all these things. So everyone is probably gonna, in some capacity, experience some type of masking that they try either successfully or unsuccessfully or often or not. But when it is a part of virtually every interaction, depending on your own, neurotypical traits and experiences in your specific life, it's exhausting, I think, is the word that usually comes to mind. I know I'm using a lot of energy to interact with people in a way that allows them to feel that I care in the way that they can receive it. Because also, I'm not a sociopath. Like, I do have feelings. It just isn't always... It's less so about not having the feelings and more so about not being able to exhibit them the same way that everyone else does naturally. So the masking really is just this almost constant sort of activity that you're doing. And there's this interesting balance of letting people in when you get closer to them to not mask as much, to be more of your authentic self. And what I realize is the best analogy that someone else helped me with in how they understood me is actually Tiffany from Big Brother and now Traders and now Destination X, just killing it. And she said, she's like, no, I feel like people misunderstand you because for the autism spectrum specifically, they call it spectrum, and it's a range of, they used to say high functioning and low functioning, and now they say, the more commonly used terms is like high support needs or lower support needs. And, I'm someone that has lower support needs, but I still have needs and detriments. And so I will tell somebody, or somebody's just aware because now I'm public about my diagnosis, and I will tell them about how yes, these are things. There are differences about me that are not typical. But most of our interactions might be typical because we're still pretty surface level or in a certain environment, professionally or whatever, where it makes sense for me to maintain the masking. And then I remove some of it, and all of a sudden you're frustrated. And the analogy that Tiffany said, she's like, I feel like it is when, you tell somebody, hey, I have this. Actually, my injury is now the perfect analogy because I tell somebody, hey, like I have this injury and it does limit me in certain ways. And specifically for me, an interesting thing, I'm realizing now how perfect this is. I have had trouble. I still have trouble on a decline. So going downstairs or going downhill is harder for me than going upstairs. So I go with people, we go upstairs, we go on a hike, we're walking around, and I'm not slowing them down because I can keep up with that pace now. But then we go downstairs and all of a sudden they're like, wait, why are you slowing me down? You're impacting me. This is annoying. I just saw you do this fine. What are you talking about? And it's like, no, remember I told you about the thing. Like, this is something I already told you about, but now you're forgetting because you saw me do all these other things.
Yeah.
And so that is, I feel like I have goosebumps thinking about how this injury is like such a perfect metaphor for what I experience and what I think a lot of people experience when you do have lower needs. They think that you have less needs. And it's just kind of an interesting yeah, an interesting part of the experience of being, someone who is neurodiverse and specifically on the autism spectrum, is people seeing you do so many things competently, thus their expectations of you increase across the board. And so there's a delicate balance of trying to articulate all of that to people and figuring out when you can share and how much to share and how much, should they care. And because you also want to explain it to people, but you're not, without coming off like you're making excuses.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds like it can be very frustrating. It also reminds me of, the invisible illnesses. Some people have chronic, let's say autoimmune. And, I've dealt with that before too, where, you seem perfectly fine on the outside. And then all of a sudden, maybe you can't go somewhere or you can't do something. And everyone's like, what do you mean? You're totally fine. And it's like, you don't feel what I feel though, right? So, in a similar way, it kind of reminds me of that. And I want to ask you, so when you're very open about, being neurodivergent. So anyone that knows you from TV knows this about you. But when you just meet someone out on the street, they have no idea who you are. They do not watch reality TV. You're just a random guy, right? And they talk to you and eventually it comes up like, I have autism or I have ADHD. Do you ever get those responses of like, what do you mean? No, you don't. You're perfectly fine.
Oh, gosh.
Does that happen?
Oh, I mean, frequently. I'd say... Yeah, actually, both in person and online. I mean, far more online, obviously, which is actually a whole nother level of conversation because they will say that seeing the diagnosis, but
we could talk about that. too.
Yeah. But when I'm talking to people in real life, I've had those almost exact words said. So I was like, wait, no, you don't. Like, why would you think that? Because we've been able to have this whole conversation or X amount of interactions. And that's, I'd say, less frustrating. It's an odd thing to say. I feel like at this point, I'm just like, why? Okay. Okay, then I guess. What do you want to do now? Like, it's almost more on them at that point. It's like, so what should we do now then with that information? Because I am, just as with the injury or chronic illness or anything else, it's like, I'm just telling you this because I have found this to be true. And if that is impacting you in some way that is negative, I'm sorry. I don't think it is. And if it is, explain that to me. I think that's more, I have a curiosity about it because I'm like, well, either, like, why would you say this? So I think that turns into a new conversation. Fortunately, I like to have discussions, like challenging discussions with people, and I like to be challenged, and I challenge my own thoughts. So I don't mind it as much. It is an odd thing to say, and I think it's more so, trying to figure out where they're coming from. Are they coming from curiosity? Are they coming from care? Or is there some more malicious purpose behind the words?
Yeah, I wonder if some people they get uncomfortable and they don't know what to do now. And so they're like, oh, no, you're fine. Let's just move on from that because they don't know how to approach it. So for people that feel that way, what would you say to make somebody just feel like they don't have to act any differently? Right? Like, what would you say to those people?
Okay, I think that is a great point because I feel like that is part of the conversation also. It's like, hey, I'm not sharing this for anything to change in this conversation. I'm just sharing this because I care and I know that it is likely that because I'm enjoying this conversation and because I've just lived life now for 34, coming on 35 years next week, I know that it is common for me to have some sort of misunderstanding because I perceive things in a certain way because of how my brain works. And I want to create space for it's funny enough, I actually don't want to create space for an excuse. I want to create space so that way you can let me know if I'm doing something that is coming up short or coming up unkind or inconsiderate in this conversation. I actually want to know that because I appreciate the conversation. I'm not sharing that, I'm not sharing any details about myself for the intention of knowing you less. I'm sharing details about myself just as with any boundaries. It's like we don't share boundaries to, keep people out of our lives. It's to keep people in. It's a conversation too. I feel like that's another aspect of communication in general is people naturally view conflict and challenges as dislike or a negative or a personal judgment, which is, I think, a greater conversation in our society right now, having trouble with being able to discuss something without feeling like they're arguing just because they're examining different points. And I even find that a common thing that happens with me because I actually get excited about challenging my own thoughts. So I'll get excited about challenging yours as well because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a way that you think about this and that's fascinating. So I want to dive into that. But when people attach themselves to their beliefs and their views, they are now feeling like you are questioning so much more about them and they're challenging them. And someone said that most people, especially, someone intellectual likes to say that, oh, I love to challenge my beliefs. And this guy said, well, no, you like to challenge your beliefs, except for those things that you really believe. Like the ones that you really believe, you don't want challenged. And for me, I am somebody who was like, no, like the more I believe it, the more I am challenging it myself constantly. And the more I believe it, the more support I probably have for it. That's how I came to that belief. But I will genuinely get excited in a conversation if I have a deep-seated belief and somebody adds in a perspective or thing, and I'm digging for that perspective. That's actually why I'm going to keep pushing and pressing back is like I'm looking for a reason to have a new point of view, but usually people do tend to feel like that's arguing, and so that's a whole nother thing.
I have found that challenging myself in relationships where I also like to kind of debate things and I have strong beliefs about certain things, right? But I want someone else to give me something so I have more to work with and maybe that'll change my mind or expand my mind. But you're right. If somebody's really attaching themselves, their ego, their personality to their belief system, they're tying it to that, then it sounds like it's an argument. So I totally understand that challenge of just like wanting to expand your mind, but you have to do it with the right people. You have to do it with people who also feel that way. And that is kind of a tough battle sometimes.
No, definitely. And then of course also saying in the language that it can be received. And one thing I when I was young, and I feel like because of probably, I'm sure it's related to my own neurodiversity, but I was a big fan of the phrase that, I'm not responsible for what I'm only responsible for what I say. I'm not responsible for how you take it. And then I realized that's just an incredibly immature thought that for some reason so many adults seem to have held on to. And I'm very frustrated by that. And I think it's a problem for so many different situations. But now I have adjusted. It's like, no, we know already that people are impacted by what you say and how you say it or how you don't say it. And so to ignore that would be, in a way, disingenuous because if we know that it matters how we say something and we choose to say it in another way, then we are now prioritizing our desire to just have this thing said over our desire to have it heard. And I think that that's something that, more of us should examine in general. It's like, do I want to tell you how I feel or do I want to make an impact? And sometimes you have to choose.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. A very good thought for a lot of us to soak in, myself included. What is a myth about autism and ADHD that you would like to debunk that a lot of people probably think is true?
Yes. When I think about myths for ADHD and autism, did you ask about both? Sorry.
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Okay,
Either or both.
Okay. I'll think for a second then.
Because just think like there's so many people with voices online, especially who have something to say and they don't even have the experience. I know that it's a popular topic right now. There's a lot of people say, "Oh, all of a sudden everyone's autistic now," right? I hear that a lot, and it's like, okay, but there's a reason why more people are getting diagnosed. So I'm just wondering if you hear certain things and you know that they're not true based on your own experience.
Yes, I think that that's a great place to start. One of the most common myths for both ADHD and autism is one of the most common traits, I think, for both ADHD and autism is that everyone has ADHD. And I think that that's actually more prevalent. And there was a time when ADHD, at least, some professionals say that it was simultaneously the most overdiagnosed and underdiagnosed mental health disorder at the same time, which is crazy and has so many reasons for that. But at the end of the day, the reason that things tend to increase is because we are learning more about them, and there's more access to resources. There's more access to sharing of information. People can now learn about what these traits look like, and rather than just deciding like, oh, this kid is, weird or hyperactive or inattentive or any of these things, it's like, oh no, we actually have a reason for why this person is exhibiting these traits at such a high level that, once again, going back to what I said earlier, it is negatively impacting their lives. And having more awareness of these things is the reason that we're seeing more of them, and having a better understanding. It's not, I think that that's kind of my question to people sometimes, is like, what would be the goal to claim any sort of diagnosis that you don't have, other than if somebody's using it to make an excuse, then that's a different conversation. And that's more about the character and the habits of that person that has nothing to do with the diagnosis. So now you're applying the description of their other behavior to this diagnosis and anyone else that shares it. But for most people, just having a better understanding of how their mind works is beneficial to them, and usually the people around them, and the people not around them that they may interact with indirectly. So when I think about a common phrase around like, oh, everyone seems autistic now, it's like, well, first off, you have to understand the different ways that bias occurs within our own algorithms. We're going to see people. So I think about whether it's reality TV or really just social media as a whole, people that are content creators. Another place that you see a disproportionate amount of autism is at science and math universities. Because it's like, if you read text, and people have been doing that now about like Oppenheimer or Albert Einstein or Da Vinci, you see it's like, oh, wait, the reason that they were able to accomplish these things and have this very specific interest group. I mean, we can look at, even the modern day comic book supervillain that Elon Musk has become, and just see it's like, wait, no, he's accomplishing all these things because because of how his brain works. And there are so many different people that I'm forgetting the scientific, the statistical term for it, but effectively it's like, no, you're seeing a lot of it because you're looking at a place where a lot of it exists. So on social media, in order to make content at the level that you need to be successful at it, you probably have to operate outside of the norm. Not probably, you definitely do. And same thing with if you were on a, reality TV show, there is a disproportionate likelihood that you got cast because by definition, you're exceptional. And I don't mean exceptional as like a good thing. I just mean you are an exception to the norm. That's why you are here. Or same thing with content or anything else, or reaching a high level of science or any sort of field. It's more than likely you could accomplish that because something is different about you that helped you to accomplish that. So yes, you are seeing more of it because we are simultaneously having a lot more awareness of how to actually diagnose things. So now more people are being diagnosed because we're learning more about it. And then you're also looking in places where there would just be more of it by the very nature of them being visible with the quantity and quality of content that they're producing or whatever odd activity or industry they're choosing to pursue. So it is hard to judge because you do need a certain amount of grace for people who are going to judge others or who are going to make these sort of statements, are going to feed that myth of like, oh, you know, there aren't really that many autistic people, or there aren't really that many people with ADHD or whatever, because they would have to have that somewhat complex understanding of how, you know, variables work and exceptions and statistics and all those things. But at the same time, I think that most people on an individual level are smart enough that if you can have that conversation with them, they could be like, oh, yeah, okay. And then they have to examine themselves, going back to what we said earlier about, are you challenging a belief that they're using to define themselves? Like, are they able to criticize someone and that allows them to not look inward or not criticize themselves or not, you know, feel bad about themselves, and you taking away the rationale they're using to criticize someone is now a attack on their identity and on their pride. So they may not want to understand it regardless, but I have a somewhat optimistic belief that most people, you know, if approached the right way, aren't that committed to that part of their identity or their negative belief. So I think that that's a common one. And I would say another one that comes to mind around autism is that, you know, everyone on the autism spectrum has the same peculiarities or basically the same traits. And, you know, there's a phrase in the neurotypical there's a phrase in the neurodiversity sort of community that says, you know, if you've met one neurodiverse person, then you've met one neurodiverse person. Like, if you met one person on the autism spectrum, then you've met one person on the autism spectrum. That doesn't mean that every other person is going to match that exact identity. And, you know, for so long, we just had Rain Man, and that was like, I think, an older movie for so many people's first exposure and only awareness of what it meant for, you know, someone to be autistic. And now you're expecting everyone to be a savant in math or something and be completely unable to hold a conversation with people. I feel that that sort of visibility, that you know, and we're creating stereotypes, basically. We're stereotyping
absolutely.
people.
What do you feel like about a show like Love on the Spectrum? Have you seen that?
So I have actually not seen Love on the Spectrum. I am not avoiding it. I do want to see it. I'm sure it's going to make me bawl my eyes out because I'm a crier in general.
It makes me cry.
That's all I've heard is so I'm sure it's going to destroy me in that way. But I from what I've heard as a whole is that overall people feel it is a helpful exposure and insight to some people on the spectrum. I think that where it comes, you know, the potential harm is just around still creating that generalization, because my understanding, like I said, I haven't seen it yet, is that they do disproportionately show people that have higher support needs. And so that, you know, could paint a picture of, even though it's a broader picture, which I think is ultimately a good thing, it's a broader picture of what people on the spectrum could be like. But then when you have someone who's very narrow-minded, which unfortunately is a large portion of our modern society, then they are like, oh, okay, so if you don't fit this box, which is a bigger box than it used to be when it was just Rain Man,
right?
It must not be true. And so that's the double-edged sword, but I feel like at the same time, we can't expect anyone to, you know, do all things, especially to account for bad actors or bad faith actors. So I don't hold them in a judgmental way to that. I think that that's more so a commentary on, people who are watching in a more closed-minded space, but that's probably how they approach many things in life. So
Yeah, and I mean,
that.
at the end of the day, it's still a reality docu-series and it's still edited a certain way. It's still cast a certain way. So we still have to look at everything with a grain of salt. I do agree with you that it does show a bigger range of different types of people in the community. But of course, they're going to cast the most interesting and maybe peculiar ones.
Yes.
But I love the show. Highly recommend it. It's very
No, I'm
sweet.
very
Very,
excited.
very sweet and cute.
I have one more myth too, I think, about
Yeah,
ADHD.
please.
And I think a common myth around ADHD is that you are constantly, jumping around to different tasks and are very hyperactive sort of view. And that's very common. But I think that it's also caused a lot of damage when people, as with anything, when people stereotype, generalize, or overgeneralize. That's how we ended up with, that's one of the major factors for how we ended up with such a disproportionate lack of diagnosis for women and for people of color. And so I feel like it is worth remembering that it's not just that there's not only one way to be ADHD, but also that the people who are dealing with ADHD will have all these other challenges in addition to lack of focus. Potentially, they could have a difficulty with some of their interpersonal relationships as far as maintaining them because of a lack of, like, something I struggle with is object permanence for people. And so it's not just about forgetting where I set something down. It's we hung up the phone and in a way you don't exist to me anymore. And people will take that personally. But, it is, so there's that level of like being able to communicate with that with someone, my family and friends, somebody that I don't know as well is like, oh yeah, like, this person's ignoring me. It's like, no, I just am really bad. If it's out of sight, it's out of mind. That's a part of how the ADHD shows up for me and a lot of people. And so it's not a matter of me not caring. Like, trust me, I don't, like, my family, I love more than you. And I forget about them. So the fact that I can forget about them is existing in a way, like to use extreme language, that I forget about them existing is more so me highlighting how much I struggle with this. And once again, it's like it's not a boundary. It's a caution of like, hey, I really appreciate reminders. Like it matters a lot if somebody can remind me of something. And trust me, I'm writing if you see, I actually have a bunch of dry erase markers because I write all over my cabinets and I have Post-its and stuff. Like I'm trying to create as many systems as I can, and a lot of them are helping. So I am doing what I can. But it's like, but please believe that there are these other struggles that come with ADHD outside of just, lack of focus on, one detail at a time.
So Kyland is here telling you that if you need his attention, you got to remind him, and you don't mind, right?
I don't mind. No,
like
I don't mind. And I'm trying on mine. I'm not trying to place the burden on you. I'm saying that if we want to achieve this goal, it would be helpful, and I'm going to work on my end, but this would be helpful. That's all I'm saying.
How does this play out in relationships, like dating and romantically? I know you're with somebody now, but just in the past overall, from before you got your diagnosis to now that you actually know, I'm kind of curious about, do you date both, or have you dated both neurotypical and neurodivergent people, and how does that kind of play out?
So to my knowledge, I have dated mostly neurotypical people, and that has actually presented a decent amount of challenges because I'd say that I think about, going back to high school and how, one of the common tropes or one of the common traits is around the way that we end conversations, a lot of people on the spectrum, is just abruptly. And so I didn't say goodbye to hang up the phone, and until I had this girlfriend halfway through high school that actually brought that up as something that bothered her. And I was like, wait, why does this bother you? This doesn't bother anyone else. Like, this is normal. And then I talked to my parents about it. My mom, I remember, she's like, oh yeah, like, yeah, that's weird. Like that's not normal. Yes, that bothers, I think, a lot of people. We're all used to it. So we know that it's and back then, this is still, I'm dating myself. I feel like not everyone had cell phones all the time. So I think your phone habits weren't yet widely known. Like, you didn't have as much exposure until I was at this age in high school. So there was less opportunities for people to notice it and call me out on it. And so my family was all like, yeah, that is actually very uncommon to just hang up without saying anything. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Good to know. So I think about, I remember, this one girl that I ended up also dating in high school, that when we first met, I was like, I don't know how I turned this around. When we first met, she somehow it came up that her father had passed away in the last year or so, and like I said, I'm studying communication. I want to learn how to talk to people. And sorry, this was in college, and so I just watched a TED Talk, and the TED Talk said that it was about communication, and it was saying how, like, you shouldn't apologize for things that aren't your fault. And so I was remembering that in this moment. So she was telling me about how her father passed away, and I was like, oh, I would say sorry about that, but I know you're not supposed to apologize for things that aren't your fault. And that was the complete sentence. And then I just remember seeing, like, a look I couldn't decipher because it wasn't, exactly, I think she was probably just confused and caught off guard. And then later on, when we, ended up building a relationship, she had talked about how, like, yeah, that was not a great response to that. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but I understand that is commonly felt.
We're a confusing species, aren't we?
Very much.
I can consider myself neurotypical, and that is confusing because I also know not to apologize for things that aren't our fault. Because I used to have this this habit of, like, let's say somebody bumped into me on the street, I would say sorry. It was like that people pleaser energy. Yes. Or I would literally apologize for things that had nothing to do with me. And then I also learned, as I just matured and got a little bit older, like, I don't always have to apologize for something that, I didn't do. Like, I can kind of, quote unquote, stand up for myself. And then yet, if somebody passes away, it's such a common thing to say, I'm sorry. So I think we are just a confusing species.
Well, exactly. And so that's actually the nuance of learning interpersonal communication through osmosis, like subconsciously, as you realize, most people that are neurotypical will know when to apply it. And so I heard it and was just like, this is the rule for everywhere. And so that process is just such an intentional process that still, this day, there's other scenarios, I'm sure, if I think deeply about it, that have happened. And so, yeah, I think that I would say I overall, dating people that are also neurodivergent I'd say it's been helpful. I'd say my current partner and is ADHD as well, and I think that and exhibits it in their own ways. But I think that there's an understanding there. There's a little bit more grace, and But I also can think of one of my best partners ever, who we have a very positive relationship, very neurotypical and very. She was kind of like my family in the sense that, I think that's why we're still so close, because she was just so understanding and graceful of okay, these are just quirky things about Kyland that I need to observe. And there are so many other benefits that he, is attentive in as a result of these quirks. So I feel like it's not necessary. I think that, but those are just some ways that I've observed it impacting my own, dating life and situations. And then also it's, a very common autistic trait is being very logic leaning to a place, once again, that is just at a higher level and a more broadly applied level than is typical for someone that's just, a reasonably more logic leaning person. so I have a awareness that I am that way. And I think, so I just pay attention to how it shows up. And an example that I think about is how virtually, like in a way, depending on how you want to define terms, all relationships are transactional. Now, when people say, oh, relationships, shouldn't be transactional, they are saying something totally different. There's a lot of context there that what they're applying it to. And I have learned and been able to understand that, but there is a trigger and annoyance and exhaustion when people use phrases that are not specific. And I think that that's something that I notice, a lot of times one thing I'll call out for people is that people will say like, oh, I just tell it how it is. It's like, no, you tell it how you see it. And that's okay. But you need to know that too, because if you think that you're just speaking factually and truthfully rather than just the fact that you're speaking your truth or your reality and how you see something, then that's going to create conflict, especially if you're saying something that, morally or ethically I feel like I need to push back against. And so I think that that's something I have noticed about, is the attention to people, or in general, people tend to use a lot of absolutes and they don't mean them.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so, and I would say there's I don't know their name because I literally just saw them, but there's this autistic high needs young man that talks, he has a shirt that I was going to pick up. It says, clarity is kindness. And they talk about how, and I think about the people in my life that go that extra step to catch themselves when they say something that is like an absolute statement. It's like, well, everyone's thinking this. It's like, okay, well, not everyone, and that little move it's not that I wouldn't be able to decipher on my own, but you're now taking that extra weight of me deciphering it off of me. And that's such a kindness and so appreciated. And so I think that's something that is a simple thing to do that I believe is helpful for everyone in communication.
No, it is. It is. And
to use an absolute of everyone.
It's so cool that you're clarifying this. I mean, you're giving me and everybody else clarity right now too. It's like, that's kind of like a love language for you. Is somebody really not just saying a cliche blanket statement, but actually saying what they mean? Maybe taking that cliche that they're saying and then explaining what they mean by that to give you a little bit more of the context behind what they're saying. And
in relationships, it especially romantic or close partners, it's all the more important because effectively you're lying. If you are saying something that's not true and you know it's not true, then that's a lie. And so now I think in most relationships, they observe lying as a negative thing to your communication in your relationship. So now, even though it's different, I understand it's not the intention, all the things, my brain is still calculating like a partner is consistently often lying to me. And that is a frustrating thing to have to process, even though I know it's different than is typically thought about.
No, it's a really good point. My boyfriend and I talk about this a lot, where we've made it a point to not use absolutes as much as we can. And we always catch ourselves. We do it, right? We're still human beings, and be like, oh, you never do that. I mean, you don't do it a lot, or like whatever that, simple wording is or phrasing is to just change. And it's actually something we talk about all the time. And he was the one that brought it up to me early on, like, I don't really like absolutes. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's not a true statement. You can't say I always do this or I never do that unless that's true. I always breathe, until the day that I die, right? So it's like, it's a really good point. And I think that if more people in the world practice not using absolutes, communication can be much clearer between people. Like you said, especially in romantic relationships, but it works with everybody. It's good at work. It's good with your family. It's good with your friends, strangers, to just practice the non-absolutes. So I love that. Thank you for making that point. For anyone out there right now who feels like they're struggling with this, they think they're too much, they're too this, they're too that, which I'm sure you've experienced, we've all experienced, right, at some point. what would you say to them to kind of feel more comfortable in their skin, especially if they are on the spectrum in some way?
I am searching for the right amount of, I'm searching for the balance between compassion and accountability, because going back to what I said earlier about how tempting it is to say, I am only responsible for what I said and not how you take it. And so, and I think that goes back to what I also, what we briefly touched on about criticism from people who are saying like, oh, well, I literally just had a message maybe in the last week that somebody was like, hey, I was just wondering, and it's funny because I thought I was going to start out with a kind thing or an inquisitive thing. And it was like, I was just wondering about like why, I noticed you have ADHD, autistic in your bio on social media and you talk about it. And do you just have that, because it's like a popular thing right now and you're just trying to capitalize on it and make excuses for any of your behavior. That way you don't have to take accountability for that. I was just like, whoa, okay, there's a lot of assumptions here. And I didn't respond to that one because it is a common thread around messages. And so one thing I've done on social media is optimize for, okay, if I have something that I hear a lot, then I want to figure out a way to speak to it all at once. And maybe this is that opportunity, because I think about the question that I go back to, like I said, is like, well, what would be my reason to do that? Because, or anyone's reason to do that? Because once again, the distinction of character and other behaviors of, is this someone who makes excuses for their behavior a lot? Or is this someone who takes accountability? Because I, on a very public stage, have had miscommunications on TV in front of millions of people that were probably, the more I review them in hindsight, a result of my brain operating differently in this neurodiverse way as opposed to being neurotypical. But I say that in the sense of, hey, this is an explanation for how this happened. So that way, at least you can know that more about my intentions. But I am personally a strong believer that impact still matters more than intention. So I'm not saying this to excuse the behavior. I'm saying this so that way, hopefully you can know that when I tell you I'm sorry, that I actually mean it, that I'm looking into it, that I'm trying to understand how this happened, so that way I can make sure it doesn't happen again for you or other people that I care about. So I am someone who really pushes that of like, hey, it's important to understand more about how your brain works. And it's worth explaining it to others, like boundaries. That way you can figure out how can we have a more harmonious, productive, effective, efficient, whatever positive goal you have in mind for that relationship. But it's important also that you don't allow those differences to become an excuse. Because if you can do better than you should, and once again, I'm speaking from my own privilege of being someone who has, lower support needs than a lot of people on the spectrum. But so it is more so, I'm not asking you to do, I'm only asking that you do your best. I'm not asking that you do the best of everyone else, like they could possibly be. I just am saying, hey, it's important that you try and communicate. I think that you will likely benefit. That's what I'm saying to the person who is, someone who is neurodivergent or just, whatever struggles you're facing. It's going to benefit you, I believe, to understand more about how your brain works and the differences and the challenges that are unique to you. But then you have to use that awareness to figure out how to be more effective and accountable for how you interact in the world. And I feel like there's a delicate balance there for each person. But I don't know. I just think it's important because I've noticed that, that actually happened on the Amazing Race, the season before mine. There was a guy, I guess, who was very consistently incredibly negative, rude to his a fiance, wife, partner, woman, and then later on, he and actually when I saw some of the clips, I was like, he probably is on the spectrum. From what I see things that I understand, I relate to. But then in a video that he posted about his diagnosis, he said specifically, he's like, I noticed while watching back, I was observing behaviors that like I'm not used to seeing, and I was just like, no. Like now, it feels like you're using this as an excuse, because when I saw these behaviors, I was like, these are my behaviors that I am used to doing, but now I understand how it can be perceived in this way. And it's still an incomplete picture of me because I have all these other interactions that are very, generally considered positive and all these things. So I think that that's really at least how I make that deciding factor is it's not even whether or not this person is being honest about a diagnosis. It's more so, how are you using it? Are you now using that language to excuse bad behavior, or are you using it to just understand yourself and communicate better about yourself with others?
Well said. Yeah. So basically just take what you know, learn more about yourself, and do the best that you possibly can to be the best version of who you are.
Yeah.
To sum it up?
Yes.
Did I sum it up well?
Definitely.
I love that. If you could talk to young Kyland right now, he's in the room with us. What age do you picture when you think of little Kyland?
It was something about this question and this line of thoughts made me instantly emotional. Got me.
That's okay. It makes sense. It's that inner child.
Yeah, for sure.
Whatever age you picture him, I just want you to talk to him and tell him from where you're sitting right now what you would want him to hear.
I'm navigating lots of thoughts because I think a significant emotion I feel when I look back at young Kyland is actually gratitude for my parents, because I have a lot of parents will come up to me now or in person or on social and talk about their kids that, how do we raise a child that is, autistic or ADHD, and, we want them to not feel limited. And I feel so humbled by hearing them saying that they see me as like an inspiration for what, hopes that they can still have for their kids. But I usually find myself struggling because I'm like, you're doing it because you're caring about your kid enough to ask and to push these things. And I benefited so much from just having a supportive, loving family, which as I've grown up and talked to so many people, I realize is not, the universal norm that everyone gets to experience. And especially children of divorce. My parents divorced before I turned 1 year old, and they both got remarried, but all four of my parents stayed in my life so heavily. So these differences, these quirks about me, like I said, my mom was so adamant about, communicating with my teachers, and then also, seeing me not getting along with other kids. Like I can look back and see very distinctly, like the single friend that I had at different times in elementary school, and how much I would beg the teachers to let me stay in instead of going to eat with lunch with the other kids or recess even, because those interactions were challenging. But the gratitude I have is I remember I was instilled with a lot of self-esteem from my parents, because they were very much like, hey, if someone calls you a purple elephant, like, why would you get offended? Because you're not a purple elephant. So if they call you anything else, like, you shouldn't be offended by that. So, and I'd say that did really, it allowed me to be comfortable. And I can remember back to third grade being, talking to the teacher and figuring out how I can create and run a student store. That way I could spend all of my recess time inside of the classroom and not have to be with the kids as much. The other students, I was a kid too. But I think, so I feel, so right now I'd say the large emotion actually came more from gratitude than any sort of like traumatic experience. So I definitely feel that it's worth, sharing with my younger self at various ages. Like, there's a quote somewhere that said, most kids grow up waiting for their parents to say sorry, and most parents grow old waiting for their kids to say thank you. And so I've been very intentional about that now in my adulthood, and I do, I think that's something I wish was I was more expressive of gratitude, even though I wasn't even a super disruptive kid, a rebellious kid by any means. But having that awareness is one thing. And I think the other thing is really just, I couldn't even pick the age exactly, but I definitely want my younger self to know, like, hey, you're going to experience some pretty extraordinary, fun things. And I think that, because I think that I had a belief that my life was going to be boring and not and I didn't even, this comes back to maybe the autistic in me. It's not even something I felt sad about. It was just like, oh yeah, I am going to probably go to MIT and learn and be an engineer. And I'm going to, I had a very cookie cutter, like, we're first generation college, and it was very much this specific path of life that wasn't extraordinary by any means. And now I look back and I think about like how maybe, even though I didn't feel bad about it, maybe there was something uninspiring and something settling about it that probably stole a lot of opportunities for joy and hope from the child that I was. And so I'd love to at least let, the younger Kyland know that, like, hey, you're gonna have some fun. And I think that I'm even speaking to myself now about like, there's still so much life, hopefully there's still so much life to live, and who knows all the exciting, amazing things you're gonna get to do. And so, be excited about it, like enjoy it as it's happening, and be excited about it, and don't take it for granted, and don't lose the spark of excitement. And allow yourself to dream.
Yeah, and boy, look at all of the things that you have done, and especially just from the outside looking in, like you've already done some phenomenal things, and we're sure that you're going to do, when I say we, I'm talking for everybody, we're sure that you're going to do a lot more. Do you have any plans of anything that you're allowed to talk about? I know every time I hit you up, you are always filming something. You're always like,
oh, gosh.
I'm filming, I'm going to be in this country, I'm going to be here. Do you have any plans for anything that you're allowed to share?
Oh, gosh. Well, I would say, so I'm not on this next season of the challenge. So this is the opposite, but I get asked so much about the challenge. And so one thing I like to let people know is that I have no control over whether or not the show continues and whether or not I'll be back. But if I am back, I will win. I feel full confidence in that. Like, I think that I just learned so much about the game already. And then having that experience in the last season I did, season 40, with everyone there, I was just like, oh, yeah, I know how to win this show now. Competing with the Jordans and the Giant Bananas in the final, I was like, I got it. Yeah, it's a wrap. So if I'm there, I'm gonna win. We'll mark it here. But I think, so outside of that, it's really just the rest of this year is focused on my own personal content I'm excited about. I'm actually talking to, a lot of the Cookout, Derek Frazier and Tiffany and Hannah Chada. They have been working on Heavy Crown Network. They do, content, and I'm going to actually do a show with them. So that's going to be coming out. I'm actually probably going to do 2 shows with them later on this year, talking about some of the shows. And then just my own, I'm doing my own personal content. We have a new season that I'm working with my managers on podcasts with a bunch of people from YouTube that I met that I'm excited about. So I'm excited to roll out more content there. So I'm just really focused on my own content right now. And then if there's more games coming up, which it seems like there might be, then we'll just all have to stay tuned and see what happens. But but I'm excited. Whatever it is that I'm going to get to do, I'm very excited about.
I'm also very excited. It's always so much fun to watch you on TV compete, and your future is bright. And when you do win the challenge, I get to post this clip of you manifesting your win. So this has been such a pleasure. Not only have I learned more about you just as a person, but just getting the word out there on so many stereotypes and things that we've debunked today, and just getting to understand you better is just such a wonderful, wonderful thing here for my show. I super appreciate you oversharing and being very vulnerable. And I know my audience appreciates it too. So just want to say thank you again for coming here and sharing with me.
No, thank you for giving me the space. I really appreciate it. And yeah, to have the permission to overshare is so helpful. So I think that you doing that with me in this moment, but then you doing it on this show and giving permission for other people to do it more in their lives is something I feel is only a benefit to everyone that watches. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. That's really sweet. All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining. Bye.